Good morning, Morai Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are holding on Daf Kaf Hey Amud Bet 25b, 23 lines from the bottom. We are in middle of discussion about in presence of what you can say Shema and in presence of what you cannot say Shema. We spoke about erva. We spoke briefly about human excrement, animal erva vegoy, urination, bathrooms, and we're really summing up that sugya right now. We have two dots, Tanu Rabbanan, and the limud of Amud Yomi today is this Chodesh Elul has been sponsored by Justine and Sarah Zarabi for the health and prosperity of Sarah Rahel Bat Nora and Ezra Hayim Ben Devorah. And it's also sponsored by Dr. Aaron and Charlene Kahen for the health and happiness and success of their children and the Ilu Nishmat, their amazing father, Dr. Nisan Ben Moshe HaKohen, Alav Shalom, that his neshama should have an aliyah. Amen. The entire limud of KBT and Chodesh Elul has been sponsored by Dr. Omid and Kelly Shayev for the health, happiness, success, and prosperity of their entire family that should have Yeshuot v'nechamot. Amen.
Amen.
So we have Tanu Rabbanan, Graf Shel Re'i. Again, it's 23 lines up from the bottom. The line starts with Revi'ita, the Maya, and says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Graf Shel Re'i v'abit shel Re'agrayim asur likrot liyat shema kenegdan. If you have vessels that they are designed specifically to contain human waste, excrement, or urine, even if they are clean and empty, it's asur to say Shema in front of them because they're considered a bathroom, right? They're designated and designed miyuchad for this. They're considered like bathroom. Even though that they're empty, there's nothing in there, they're clean. And urine themselves, as we learned yesterday, they're asur to say Shema in front of them until you put some water inside. And we had a machloket. The Gemara is going to repeat the machloket. How much water do you have to put inside meraglayim until you could say Shema in front of it? Even a little bit. We mentioned before that the logic behind this is because Isur the Rabbanan, Hem Amru Behem Amru. Chazal said you put a little bit is fine. Again, remember that this is a meraglayim that does not smell. Now, those who know the physics of it, meraglayim is 95+% water. The element that makes it smell is if it stays, it smells more. That's how it works, the physics of it. So if it's kind of like more fresh and it doesn't smell much, then of course you could say Shema by putting just a little bit water. According to this Shita, Halacha of course has it like Rab Zakai Omer Revi'it. You have to put a Revi'it of water inside, and then you could say Shema in front of it. Now the Gemara is going to have a very interesting debate. What do you do if you have a room? Again, a preface to this is you have to realize that in the time of Chazal, it wasn't that you woke up in the morning, you flipped the switch and you went to the bathroom and then you flushed the toilet. The toilets were outside the house. It meant that you had to get dressed, you had to go out, and who knows, you had coyote, I don't know what they had outside there, no light. It was complicated. So the way people had it was if somebody needed the bathroom in the middle of the night, they had a bucket there. That's how it was, the reality of life. So if you have this bucket inside your room, you want to say Shema. Again, as we mentioned before, don't laugh at it, because nowadays also you have people with catheters, and that's exactly this scenario in a modern day and age. Or you have a kid that is trying to be potty trained and they're in the middle right before they actually potty train. This happens also a lot, that sometimes you have a potty next to their bed, and you wake up in the morning, the potty has some urine inside. So what do? Can you say Shema in that room? Can you say it facing this potty? Is it behind your bed? Is it in front of your bed? When can you say Kriyat Shema when you have a potty, basically, of urine in your room? Says the Gemara. Ben lifnei hamita, ben la'achar hamita, whether it's behind the bed and the bed is blocking it between you and it, or it's lifnei hamita is right in front of you, the same side as you. You're sitting on this side of the bed, and this is the same side as yours. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer le'achar hamita koreh lifnei hamita eno koreh. So that was the Tana Kama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds no. If it's the same side as you are, and the bed is not blocking, you can't read. If it's on the other side of the bed, then you can read it. Because there's some blockage between you and the urine. Of course, again, it doesn't smell, and then you could do it. Says the Gemara, but you could distance yourself 6 feet from it, and then you could read. In the same room, right? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. So please, Rabotai, remember these names for just the next 3.5 minutes, and then you can forget it for the rest of your life, right? because it's going to be a stira in just a moment of who says what. So this was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Remember, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one that says if it's on the other side of the bed, you could do it. If it's the same side of the bed, you can't do it, and call it a day, right? That's what he says. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is super duper machmir. He says, no. Even if it's on the other side of the bed, absolutely not. Afilu bayit me'ama. Even if you have a room that is me'ama, it's 50 meters, that's 150 feet wide, still you cannot do it. Lo yikra yotziem. You cannot say Shema in the same room as the bucket, the potty basically, until you take it out of the room or you put it under the bed. Why under the bed? Because under the bed it's equivalent of being buried in the ground basically. It's not in that room. It has its own domain there, right? Which we're going to discuss what that means exactly. But the Gemara says you have to take it out of the room. In other words, to understand this, in order to understand this, the halachic concept of this, kol bayit ka'arba amot damya. Then there's a shita in halacha that the entire house, the entire room that you're in, the confinements of a room, regardless of the size of the room, is considered arba amot. It's like your immediate surrounding. Remember, why is immediate surrounding? Why is 4 amot? Because it's considered your machane. It's considered your immediate surrounding. There's a shita in Shas that holds if you are in a confinement of a room, that is your immediate surrounding. If you're not in confinement of a room, if you're outside in the open, so fine, 4 amot. But if I'm in this room, this is my place right now. I take over the entire place as my immediate surrounding. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar seems to be of that shita, that the entire room, even if it's 100 amot, is still considered my immediate surrounding. Hence, if you have a potty there anywhere in the room, behind the bed, on top of the bed, in the ceiling, it doesn't make a difference. It is my place, and it's asur to say until you take it out. Says the Gemara. So remember those two shitot. Yes.
Even if it's completely clean.
Now we're talking about actual meraglayim.
So if it's empty, then it's not.
Well, the Gemara did not talk about that in this moment right now, but the truth is, if you're exposed to a bathroom, we're going to discuss that as well. If you're exposed to actual bathroom, whether or not that's considered also a problem, right? So again, potties, if it's considered like bathroom, which is the halacha really, even though the Gemara did not discuss that, it's considered, if it's in the same room as yours, it becomes a problem. Says the Gemara, Ibaya lehu. They asked the question in the Bet Midrash, Hechi kamar. How is he dividing and saying this halacha? Achar hamita kore miyad. Does it mean that when the potty is behind the bed, regardless of how far or close it is to you, it could be 2 feet away from you, and it's mutar? And lifnei hamita, and if it's in the same side of the bed as you are, marchik 4 amot vekore, then all you have to do is just distance yourself 6 feet from it, 400 from it, and then you could say it. Or Dilma, or maybe that's not what he's saying. He's saying, if it's behind the bed, if it's behind the bed, it's sufficient to distance yourself 4 amot, and the combination of the 6 feet and having the blockage of the bed, that is sufficient to read. But if it's already in the same side as the bed, there is no blockage between you and it, it's no longer sufficient to go 6 feet away. Well, what is 6 feet gonna do? It's in the same domain as it. There's no blockage between you and it, and therefore, eno korek klal. You can't read it until you take it out of the room. Tashma says the Gemara, let's prove it from a different bright. Right? This is a question we have. Let's prove it from a different bright. The Tanya that the Braita says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Achar Amita kore miyad. If it's behind the bed on the other side, you can read it miyad. That means you don't need any distance. So long as you have a blockage of the bed, even if it's within your 6 feet, within 4 amot, you can read, no problem. So that seems to answer our question. So you see, Achar Amita, behind the bed, there's no requirement of 6 feet. But says the Gemara, if it's Lifnei Amita, Marchik 400, if it's the same side of the bed as you are, then you need to distance yourself 4 amot, 6 feet from it, and then you read it. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, Afilu bayit me'ama lo yikra. Even if the room is 100 amot, you should not read until you take it out. Now, what's strange about this? It's exactly the opposite. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was the one in the first Braita that said what? Before, behind the bed, in front of the bed, 6 foot, not 6 foot. That was Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar was the one that said, no way, shmei. In the same room, you cannot have it. Now it's exactly Mukhlefet Hashitot. It's exactly the opposite. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the one that says 4 amot, and Rabbi Gamliel is the one that says can't have it in the same room. The Gemara is going to ask that in just a moment. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, he says, good, you answered my question. Yeah, and our question was what? Our question was, when it's behind the bed, do you need 6 foot also? Right? So we answered that. We said, if it's behind the bed, you don't need any distance. The mere fact that the bed is blocking it is sufficient. Right? We answered that question. He says, you answered my question. But the problem is, you have a bigger problem. The two brightness are exact opposites of each other. It's estira mineh ubeh. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is a question. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is a question. Says the Gemara, epuch batraita. You should switch the second braita. In other words, instead of saying in the second braita that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the one that requires 4 amot, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one that requires you to take it out of the room, switch that. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one, exactly like the first braita. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one who says you need 4 amot if you're on the same side, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is the one that says you have to take it out of the room.
Why not put the second braita?
Exactly. The Gemara asks the question, right? We made this up before the shoe, right? The Gemara says that. Says the Gemara, who machazita? Who told you the afchat batraita? Who told you to decide to switch the names in the second braita and establish that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the one that holds 4 amot and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says take it out of the room? Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you should switch the first braita. Who told you to decide? Says the Gemara, epuch kamaita. Why don't you switch the names in the first braita, which would end up, every one of them would be exactly the opposite shita. Says the Gemara, man sham'at leh de amar kuleh bayit ka'arba amot tami. Who do you know that says, that holds halachically, that the entire room halachically is judged like your 4 immediate amot surrounding you? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. It is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And therefore, we are establishing Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar to say that when you have a bucket of meraglayim in the room, you cannot say Shema, regardless of how large your room is and how distant it is from you, until you take it out of the room, because it is considered in my immediate vicinity, is my immediate area. Says the Gemara. Well, again, if you cover it, if you cover the bathroom by tzoah, we said covering is good enough, right? We said covering by tzoah is good enough. And here also, because it is not a betakise kavua, it would be also sufficient to have a cover on it, which we're going to discuss it just in a moment. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Yosef, Ba'i mineh Rav Huna. Rav Yosef said, I asked Rav Huna. This is now 10 lines up. Mita pachot mishalosh mishalosha pshita li de kelavud dami. Says if you have a bed that the surface, the bottom of the bed is within 3 tfachim of the ground, right? In other words, between this and the ground is less than 3 tfachim, and you stick the bucket of meraglaim under the bed, it says that is pashut to me, that's good, that works. Why? Because we always say kol lavud, and whenever you have kol pachot mi shalosh tfachim kelavud dami, anything less than shalosh tfachim, 3 tfachim, it's as if it's attached, right? In halachot of sukkah, we have Yom Tov of Sukkot coming up. It's the same thing. If you have the beams less than 3 tfachim from each other, it's halach. The halacha looks at them as if they're attached, right? Kol pachot mi shelosha tfachim kelavud dami. Therefore, it's considered a good cover because it's as if the bed is collapsed basically on top of this, and it's considered a proper cover, right? Now, says the Gemara, how about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? In other words, it's 3 or more, but less than 10. We'll see why less than 10. Amale, so this is Rav Yosef asking for Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Lo yadana, I don't know. I don't know what the halacha is by that. Is that considered covered? Or is that not considered covered? Because it's sitting in a domain. Imagine to yourself something that's like 7, 8 tfachim. You have a bed, right? And you have the bottom of the bed is here. And you see the avit of meraglayim, the bucket underneath the bed. Is that considered in the room or is that considered in the ground? Right? Is that considered a good cover? In other words, you spoke about cover, it's covered, but is that a proper cover or is that considered just sitting in the room, basically, under the bed?
Why would the Gemara report that he doesn't know? Why just not put it at all?
Because the Gemara is going to leave it as a question just in a moment, right? Says the Gemara, and also, even if the Gemara had a maskana, it's good to know that Rav Huna didn't know. If someone in future says Rav Huna Paskin, says no, Rav Huna over here said he doesn't know. It's not clear, right? Says the Gemara. And asara vaday lo mibai. And if it's 10 already, the cavity under the bed between the ground and the bottom of the bed is 10 tfachim, then I don't have a question either. Which means what? Which means it's not considered a cover already. That's 10 tfachim. It's a whole reshut basically under there. Now, what kind of cover is that? 10 tfachim, it becomes its own area. So the bed is in a different area even. The bucket that's on the ground has nothing to do with the bed that's 10 tfachim higher. The surface of the bed is considered in a different reshut, in a different domain. And therefore, the bucket is sitting where? In your room.
It doesn't matter.
Right next to you.
The size of the bucket doesn't make a difference?
No.
But
It could be a cup, it could be a bucket.
But aren't you in a totally different domain if you're on top of the bed? Because you're
No, you're sitting in the room.
still in the room.
Yeah. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Abaye says, Shapira of that, good. It's good for you that you don't have a question. Because kol asara reshuta acharitihi. When it's asara, when it's 10 tfachim high, the bed is considered in a different reshut. Therefore, the bucket of the meraglayim is sitting in your room in front of you. Of course, you shouldn't have a question that would be asur to say Shema in front of that bucket. It's not covered. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Rava sums up this whole halacha. Hilcheta, the halacha is pachot mishelosha kelavud. Less than 3 is good because it's like lavud, it's like attached. Asara reshuta achariti. 10 already is considered not covered because the bed is in a different reshut. Mishelosha ad asara hainu deba mine Rav Yosef Rav Huna. And from 3 until 10 is a question that Rabbi Yosef asked Rav Huna, and we don't have a good answer for it. Now the Rashba asks, why does the Rava have to sum up? I just read that. And Rashba has a complicated answer which is beyond the scope of this talk. Yes. Yeah, if there's no smell and it's covered, then you're good. And many people just put it in the bathroom of the room before they say bracha, but nevertheless, yes, if it's covered and there's no smell, that would be fine. Amar Rav, the first wide line we are. Amar Rav, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, which holds what? You have to take it out of the room. Vechen Amar Bali. Bali is one of the names of Amoraim. He also holds that you have to take it out of the room. Amar Rabbi Yaakov the Bat Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. He also holds the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The Rava Amar, Rava holds no. Ein halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. You do not need to take it out of the room so long as you're 4 amot away from it and there is no smell. Then you could say Shema in the same room as the potty. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to have a very interesting halacha that we have not been introduced to it, and that is Tashmish Hamita. We spoke about it a little bit in the Sugya of Tefillin. It says Tashmish Hamita in the room that there is Sefer Torah there. Says the Gemara, starts it with a story. Rabbi Achai is Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel. Rabbi Achai's son was marrying the daughter of the Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel, the daughter of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel. And says the Gemara, Aile lechupa. They went to the chuppah after the wedding. Velava mistaya milta. He could not be successful. They couldn't consummate the marriage. Says the Gemara, Azal Batre, the father of Achai, went over there. Le'ayuni, he went to see why is it not, there's no siyata d'shmaya, it's not happening. Why is it? Chaza Sefer Torah de mancha. He saw there's a Sefer Torah in the room, in the chuppah. Huh? Not covered. Says the Gemara, well, Sefer Torah, even if it's covered, it has to be in a different mechitza. Says the Gemara, Amar Nehu, Aiku, how is this? Hashta lo atai. If I would not have come here to check and find this Sefer Torah, sakantun leberi, you would put my son's life in danger. It's a sakara to disrespect Torah in that way, to that tashmish hamita in a room that there is Sefer Torah in it. That's considered a sakara. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braita, bayit sheyesh bo Sefer Torah, if you have a room that there is Sefer Torah in it, or tefillin, or you have tefillin in it, asur shamesh po et hamita. It's asur for husband and wife to have tashmish hamita. Until you take the tefillin or Sefer Torah out, or shianichem keli betoch keli, or you cover them 2 covers inside one another, and not just 2 covers. You say, well, I have a Sefer Torah, could have a cover, you have an aron for it, and the Sefer Torah itself is in its own box, so that's considered 2 covers already. No. It has to be Amar Abaye lo shanu ela bekeli she'eino kilyan. At least one of the covers has to be a cover that is not miyuchad, is not designated for that thing. So if you have a box of Sefer Torah, that's of course designated for Sefer Torah, and the Aron also is. That's not sufficient. You have to also have a cover on top of it, maybe put a blanket on top of it. That would be considered already two covers. Our Bekelishu Kilyan, because vessels that are made and designated for it, afilu asara mani, even if you have 10 of them, kechad manadami, is considered like one, and therefore is not going to be sufficient. And Bezat Hashem, we're going to continue this in the days to come.
Wow, almost done with the parrot.
Same thing. Svarim also is the same thing. Two covers.